Wind howling like a wounded animal masked the desperate, fading whimpers. Navy SEAL Liam Mitchell expected brutal isolation in the frozen Cascade Mountains, not a desperate fight for survival. Buried beneath 3 feet of snow lay a dying mother, a tactical K9, shielding her frozen pups. Time was up. Blinding sheets of white slammed against the reinforced glass of Liam Mitchell's timber-framed cabin. Nestled deep in the unforgiving terrain of the Mount Baker wilderness, the structure was a fortress designed to keep the world out. For Liam, a retired chief petty officer who had spent 15 years operating in the shadows with Naval Special Warfare Development Group, isolation was not a punishment, it was a prescription. Temperatures had plummeted to 22 degrees below zero. The radio had been broadcasting severe winter storm warnings for 3 days, declaring the mountain pass entirely impassable. Most sensible people had evacuated to the lower elevations of Bellingham or Seattle. Liam had simply chopped more wood, checked his generator, and locked the heavy deadbolts. He was used to the cold. It was the quiet he sometimes struggled with, the silence that allowed memories of Kandahar and Fallujah to creep back into his peripheral vision. Stepping onto his wraparound porch to clear the exhaust vent for his diesel generator, Liam pulled his heavy parka tight against his neck. The wind was a physical force, shoving him backward as he navigated the knee-deep drifts. He carried a heavy iron shovel, methodically carving a path toward the side of the house. That was when his combat-honed instincts flared. It was not a sight, but a sound. Barely perceptible over the shrieking gale, it was a high-pitched, rhythmic vibration. Most would have dismissed it as the wind whistling through the pine needles. But Liam had spent a lifetime distinguishing between environmental noise and the sounds of life. He paused, leaning against his shovel, and tilted his head, letting his exposed ear take the brunt of the freezing air. There it was again. A whimper. Frail. Desperate. Dropping the shovel, Liam unclipped the heavy waterproof flashlight from his belt and pushed past the safety of his cleared path, wading waist-deep into the treacherous powder toward the tree line. The snow was falling so fast, it instantly erased his footprints. Sweeping the beam of his flashlight across the base of an ancient Douglas fir, he noticed an unnatural mound. The snow was packed differently here, disturbed, piled in a frantic circular pattern. Liam dropped to his knees, ignoring the biting cold seeping through his tactical pants, and began digging with his heavily gloved hands. Fur. He hit coarse, ice-caked fur. Brushing the snow away with frantic precision, he uncovered the trembling, frost-bitten head of a large German shepherd. The dog was in the final, agonizing stages of hypothermia. Her dark muzzle was completely white, with frost, her eyes glazed and half-closed. Yet, the moment Liam's hand brushed her cheek, her survival instinct violently engaged. With a terrifying guttural snarl, the shepherd lunged, snapping her jaws at his wrist. Liam fell backward into the snow, narrowly avoiding a bite that would have shattered his radius. He aimed his flashlight at her, his heart hammering against his ribs. She wasn't just a stray. Even buried in the snow, her posture was unmistakable to anyone who had served. Around her neck and chest was a heavy-duty, faded olive-drab tactical harness, the kind outfitted with reinforced handles and heavy metal D-rings. She was a working dog, a K9. Despite her aggression, she didn't pursue him. She couldn't. Her hindquarters were completely buried, and her front paws were wrapped protectively around a small hollow she had dug beneath the roots of the tree. Liam shifted his angle, peering into the dark recess beneath her chest. 3 tiny, motionless shapes lay nestled against her freezing underbelly. Puppies. They couldn't have been more than a few days old. The mother had used her own body as a living shield, absorbing the lethal freeze of the blizzard to keep the residual heat focused on her offspring. She was dying so they could live. Easy, Liam whispered, his voice steady, projecting the calm authority he used to ground panicked rookies in the middle of a firefight. Stand down, girl. I'm friendly. The shepherd bared her teeth, revealing a glint of metal, a titanium canine implant, another hallmark of a military or high-tier police. K9. She growled, but the sound rattled in her fluid-filled lungs. Her head wavered, heavy with exhaustion, before dropping back into the snow. She was out of time. Her body was shutting down. Liam knew he had seconds before the cold claimed them all. Taking off his heavy, insulated parka, he braved the freezing wind in just his thermal shirt. He rolled the coat into a thick bundle and approached the dog slowly, keeping his hands visible. "I know it hurts," Liam murmured, crawling closer. "But we're leaving." As he reached for the puppies, the mother rallied for one final, desperate defense. She lunged, sinking her teeth into Liam's left forearm. Pain flared hot and bright, cutting through the numbness of the cold. The bite was weak compared to what she was capable of, but her teeth still tore through his thermal sleeve and broke the skin. Liam didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He held his arm perfectly still, looking directly into her fading, terrified eyes. "I've got you," Liam said, his voice dropping to a low, soothing rumble. "You did your job. You protected them. Now let me do mine." For a long, tense second, the dog held his arm in her jaws. Then, slowly, the tension drained from her jaw. She released his arm, letting her head slump onto his thigh, surrendering completely to the stranger in the snow. Working with ruthless efficiency, Liam bundled the 3 freezing puppies inside the thick down of his parka, zipping them securely against his chest so they could absorb his body heat. Then he grabbed the reinforced handle on the shepherd's tactical harness, wrapped his bleeding left arm around her heavy torso, and hauled her 70-pound ice-encrusted body over his shoulders. The 50-yard trek back to the cabin felt like a marathon. The wind screamed in protest, trying to push him to his knees. His muscles burned, his breathing ragged, but the crushing weight of the dog on his back felt like a familiar ghost. It wasn't the first time Liam Mitchell had carried a wounded comrade out of a hostile environment. He kicked the heavy oak door of his cabin open, spilling into the entryway and slamming the door shut against the howling storm. Heat blasted from the massive stone fireplace, a stark and shocking contrast to the lethal freeze outside. Liam dropped to the thick rug in the center of the living room, gently lowering the exhausted mother dog near the hearth. She collapsed instantly, her breathing shallow and dangerously irregular. Ignoring his bleeding arm, Liam unzipped his parka and carefully extracted the 3 puppies. They were tiny, helpless things, completely silent. 2 of them squirmed weakly as they hit the warm air, their tiny paws paddling against the rug. But the 3rd puppy did not move. Liam's chest tightened. The smallest pup was limp. Its mucous membranes tinted a terrifying shade of blue. It was completely unresponsive. Operating on pure muscle memory and tactical combat casualty care training, Liam grabbed a clean, warm fleece blanket from the couch and vigorously rubbed the blue puppy, trying to stimulate blood flow and generate friction heat. Nothing. He flipped the tiny animal over, clearing its airway with his pinky finger, and placed his mouth completely over the puppy's snout. He blew 2 tiny measured puffs of air into its lungs, just enough to expand the chest without rupturing it. He placed 2 fingers on the pup's chest, right over the heart, and began rapid, gentle compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4, breathe. The mother dog, despite being at the edge of death herself, lifted her heavy head. She watched Liam intently, her amber eyes locked on his frantic, desperate efforts. She didn't growl. She didn't try to intervene. It was as if she understood that this man was fighting a war she had no strength left to fight. 1, 2, 3, 4, breathe. "Come on, little one, don't quit on me," Liam muttered, sweat mixing with the melting snow on his forehead. "Your mother gave too much for you to quit now." He continued the CPR for 2 agonizing minutes. Just as the grim reality of loss began to settle in Liam's gut, the tiny body in his hands gave a violent shudder. The puppy coughed, expelling a small amount of clear fluid from its nose, and let out a thin, raspy squeak. Liam closed his eyes, releasing a heavy breath he didn't know he was holding. He immediately tucked the revived puppy against the mother's stomach, placing the other two beside it. The shepherd let out a low, exhausted sigh, curling her body tightly around her offspring. She looked up at Liam, the wild aggression completely gone, replaced by a profound, soulful gratitude. She slowly extended her tongue, weakly licking the blood drying on Liam's forearm. "You're welcome," Liam whispered, moving to fetch his medical kit to patch his own arm. With his wound cleaned and wrapped in white gauze, Liam turned his attention to the mother's tactical collar. He needed to know who she was. Carefully sliding his fingers under the heavy nylon, he unclasped the buckle. Engraved on the blackened steel tag was a single name, Nix. Beneath the name was a military designation and a phone number for the regional ranger station down in the valley. Liam walked over to his heavy-duty ham radio set up in the corner of the room. The storm was playing havoc with the atmosphere, static hissing violently through the speakers. He adjusted the squelch, dialing into the emergency frequency used by local law enforcement and mountain rescue. "Base camp, this is actual. Station 4, do you read? Over." Static. Liam tweaked the dial. "Base camp, this is Liam Mitchell. Emergency priority. Do you read?" A voice broke through the crackling noise, warped but recognizable. It was Sarah Jenkins, the lead dispatcher for the county. "Liam? Good Lord. Your signal is garbage. We thought you were snowed in for the week. Are you secure?" "Over." "I'm secure, Sarah, but I have a situation. I just pulled a tactical K9 out of a snowbank near my perimeter. She was half buried, nursing a litter. Designation is Nix. I need you to pull the registry on her. Over." The radio went dead silent for a long time. The static hissed ominously in the background. "Say again, Liam." Sarah's voice was no longer casual. It was tight, laced with an unmistakable edge of panic. "Did you say Nix?" "Affirmative. German Shepherd. Titanium implant on the upper left canine. She's in rough shape, but she's stabilizing." "Liam, listen to me very carefully," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper, as if she were afraid someone in her own office was listening. "You need to lock your doors, load your weapons, and turn off your lights. Right now." Liam frowned, his eyes darting toward the heavy window shutters. "Explain, Sarah. What's going on?" "Nix isn't a stray, Liam. She belonged to Staff Sergeant David Reed, a DEA tracker we had working on loan with the Border Task Force. 2 weeks ago, David was found dead at the bottom of Devil's Ridge. They ruled it an accidental avalanche casualty. And," Liam pressed, his military mind already calculating distances and threat vectors, "and the coroner pulled a 5.56 green tip round out of David's femur before they buried him." Sarah replied grimly. "It wasn't an accident. David was tracking a high-value smuggler, a vicious cartel enforcer named Arthur Cale, who uses these mountains to move synthetic narcotics into Canada. When they found David's body, his dog was missing. We assumed she died in the avalanche. But if Nix is alive, then she's a loose end," Liam finished the thought, his blood running cold. "Worse," Sarah corrected. "David radioed in right before he went dark. He said he secured Kael's ledger, a digital drive, with every drop point, buyer, and bank account the cartel uses. But they never found the drive on David's body. The feds believe David hid the drive on the dog before he was killed. Kael knows it. He hasn't left the mountain, Liam. He's been hunting that dog for 2 weeks. If she's at your cabin..." Liam slowly turned his head to look at the exhausted shepherd sleeping by the fire. He walked over to her tactical harness resting on the coffee table. Running his fingers along the thick padding, he felt a rigid, rectangular shape sewn deep into the nylon lining. He pulled his combat knife from his pocket, carefully slicing the seam. A small, waterproof, vacuum-sealed pouch fell onto the table. Inside was a heavy-duty, encrypted USB drive. Suddenly, The cabin plunged into total darkness. The low hum of the diesel generator outside sputtered, choked, and died completely. The only light remaining was the flickering orange glow of the fireplace, casting long, menacing shadows across the log walls. Liam didn't move. Generators didn't just shut off during a freeze. They were designed to run continuously. Someone had cut the fuel line. Over the howling wind outside, Liam heard a distinct, unnatural sound. It was the heavy, deliberate crunch of a snowshoe stepping onto his wooden wraparound porch. Arthur Cale had found them. Footsteps echoed through the timber framing, slow and deliberate, pacing the length of the porch. Liam crouched low, sliding silently across the hardwood floor toward the reinforced gun safe, bolted to the master bedroom wall. His left arm throbbed violently where Nix had bitten him, the bandage already damp with fresh blood, but he locked the pain away in a mental vault. "Chief Petty Officer Liam Mitchell," a voice called out from the other side of the heavy oak door. It was shockingly calm, carrying clearly over the howling wind. It didn't sound like a desperate cartel enforcer. It sounded like a businessman closing a deal. 15 years in DVGRU. Silver Star. 2 Purple Hearts. You're a man who understands the brutal mathematics of survival. My name is Arthur Cale, and I believe you have something that belongs to me. Liam spun the dial on his safe, the metallic clicks deafening in the quiet cabin. He grabbed a matte black Sig Sauer P226, slapping a staggered column magazine into the well, and racked the slide. Next, he pulled out a heavily modified Remington 870 tactical shotgun, stuffing extra double-aught buckshot shells into the pockets of his thermal pants. "I'm going to make this very simple, Mitchell," Cale continued, his voice shifting toward the living room window. "I don't care about you. I don't care about your cabin. I just want the dog. Hand over the shepherd, and my associate and I will walk back down this mountain, leaving you to your peaceful retirement. You have exactly 1 minute to decide before we turn this wooden box into your coffin." Associate. Cale wasn't alone. Liam moved swiftly back to the living room. Nix was trying to stand. Her hind legs shook violently, her claws scraping against the rug. Her maternal instinct was warring with her agonizing hypothermia. She positioned her battered body between the front door and her 3 sleeping puppies, a low, wet growl rumbling in her chest. "No," Liam whispered, gripping her tactical harness and gently forcing her back down. "You did your tour, Nix. Stay with the kids. I've got the watch." He quickly grabbed the fleece blanket holding the 3 puppies and slid them beneath the heavy, cast-iron wood stove. The metal was radiating deep residual heat, and the heavy iron legs offered them ballistic protection. Nix crawled under the stove with them, her golden eyes watching Liam with a terrifying, absolute understanding. She knew what was coming. Liam took up a position behind the kitchen island, a thick slab of granite that would easily stop small arms fire. He leveled the Remington at the front door. He didn't bother responding to Cale. In Liam's experience, talking to men like Arthur Cale only gave away your position and your psychological state. Silence was a weapon. 50 seconds, Mitchell," Cale yelled, a hint of irritation cracking his calm facade. Liam closed his eyes, mapping the cabin in his mind. The front door was reinforced, solid oak, but the hinges were standard steel. The windows had storm shutters, but they wouldn't hold up to a breaching round. If Cale had a partner, they would attempt a classic pincer movement, one breaching the front, the other taking the rear kitchen door. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Footsteps at the back door. Liam pivoted, aiming the shotgun toward the kitchen entryway, just as a heavy, muffled thwomp sounded against the exterior wood. Breaching charge. "Get down!" Liam yelled to the empty room as the back door blew inward with a deafening explosion. Splinters of wood and twisted metal shrapnel ripped through the kitchen, shredding the drywall and shattering the hanging ceramic lights. The freezing wind instantly howled into the room, bringing a blinding swirl of snow with it. A dark figure stepped through the smoke and snow, sweeping a suppressed submachine gun across the room. Liam didn't hesitate. He squeezed the trigger of the Remington. The roar of the shotgun in the enclosed space was catastrophic. The double-aught buckshot caught Cale's associate, A massive man in white winter camouflage square in the chest, lifting him off his feet and throwing him backward off the porch into the blizzard. Before Liam could pump the shotgun, the front window shattered inward. Cale had used the rear explosion as a distraction. He didn't bother with the door. He simply smashed the glass and opened fire through the storm shutters. High-velocity rounds chewed through the log walls, snapping through the air like angry hornets. Ceramic plates in the kitchen shattered. The couch cushions exploded into clouds of white stuffing. Liam hit the floor, tasting wood dust and copper. He crawled backward, abandoning the kitchen island and moving toward the narrow hallway. "You chose poorly. Seal," Cale roared, vaulting through the shattered window. He landed heavily on the living room floor, his tactical flashlight cutting through the darkness, sweeping frantically for a target. Liam popped up from the edge of the hallway, raising the Sig Sauer, and fired 3 rapid shots. Cale scrambled behind the massive stone fireplace, one of Liam's rounds sparking off the stone inches from his face. The cabin descended into a deadly, terrifying game of cat and mouse. The wind screaming through the blown-out doors dropped the interior temperature below freezing in seconds. Snow drifted across the hardwood floors. Liam's breath plumed in front of him. Thick white clouds that threatened to give away his position. "You think you're a hero?" Cale taunted from behind the stonework. "You think hiding that drive makes you righteous?" David Reed thought he was righteous too. "You know what he did when I cornered him on Devil's Ridge?" he begged. "He begged me to spare that miserable mutt. I shot him in the leg and watched the avalanche bury him alive." Rage, cold and sharp, flooded Liam's veins. He checked his magazine. 8 rounds left. He needed an angle. Suddenly, Cale pulled a flare gun from his tactical vest. He cracked it open, loaded a thick red shell, and smiled. "If I can't have the drive, Mitchell, no one gets it. Let's see how well a Tier 1 operator burns." Cale fired the flare directly into the center of the room. It struck the heavy, oil-treated wooden beams supporting the loft. The incendiary compound ignited instantly, spraying white-hot magnesium sparks across the room. The dried timber caught fire with terrifying speed, flames licking upward, casting violent, dancing shadows across the cabin. Smoke began to fill the room, thick and acrid. Liam coughed, his eyes watering. He had to end this now. He broke cover, charging across the hallway to flank the fireplace. Cale anticipated the move. He stepped out from the opposite side, raising his rifle. Liam fired. Cale fired. Pain erupted in Liam's side like a branding iron. Cale's bullet grazed Liam's ribs, tearing through thermal fabric and flesh. The impact spun Liam hard to the right, causing his own shots to go wide, burying themselves in the log walls. He crashed into the heavy oak dining table, the Sig Sauer sliding across the floor, out of reach. Cale advanced slowly, the fire roaring behind him, painting him in demonic shades of orange and red. He pointed the barrel of his rifle directly at Liam's chest. "Game over, Chief." Acrid black smoke scraped the back of Liam's throat, tasting like burnt pine and melting plastic. The roof beams above them popped, a sound like dry bones snapping under pressure. Liam stared down Cale's steel rifle barrel, feeling the phantom burn of the bullet grazing his ribs. Blood soaked his thermal shirt, sticking warm and wet against his side. A shadow detached itself from the cast-iron wood stove. Nix. She shouldn't have been able to walk. Her core temperature had been lethal an hour ago, but she moved with terrible, silent purpose. Her paws made no sound on the ash-covered floorboards. She didn't growl. She didn't telegraph her strike. She just lodged. 70 pounds of German Shepherd slammed into Cale's back. Her jaws, reinforced with a titanium canine, bypassed his heavy tactical vest and crushed deep into the trapezius muscle of his shoulder. Cale shrieked, the sound tearing through the roar of the fire. His rifle discharged into the ceiling, plaster raining down. He collapsed forward, thrashing to crush the dog. But Nix anchored herself, driving her teeth deeper, pinning him with the exact brutal efficiency David Reed had taught her. Liam ignored the white-hot agony in his side. He lunged across the floorboards, bypassing his discarded pistol to grab the heavy, wrought-iron fire poker. Cale had drawn a serrated combat knife, swinging wildly backward toward Nix's flank. Liam brought the iron rod down. The dull, sickening crunch of Cale's radius bone shattering echoed beneath the crackle of flames. The knife skittered across the floor. Dropping his knee squarely onto Cale's spine, Liam pressed the iron poker down across the back of the smuggler's neck, grinding his face into the ash. "Call her off," Cale gagged, spitting blood and wood dust. "You came into my home," Liam said, his voice a low, mechanical rasp right by Cale's ear. "You brought a war to my front door. The only reason you leave breathing is so David Reed's family gets to look you in the eye at sentencing." Liam whipped heavy tactical zip ties from his pocket, binding Cale's shattered wrist to his left arm. "Nix. Os." The dog froze. Her golden eyes tracked from the bleeding man to Liam. Slowly, she unhinged her jaw and limped back toward the wood stove, collapsing instantly in front of her pups. The adrenaline was gone. The heat was blistering. Liam threw his parka over Nix, scooped the 3 squirming puppies into his arms, and dragged Cale out the shattered doorway. The freezing night air hit Liam's lungs like shattered glass. The blizzard had finally exhausted itself. Above the tree line, the heavy clouds fractured, exposing a hard, starlit sky. He locked Cale inside the reinforced, windowless woodshed. Then he secured Nix and her litter in the heated cab of his 4x4 truck. Pulling his satellite phone, Liam dialed the emergency frequency. "Sarah," he said, watching his cabin roof cave in. A geyser of orange sparks shooting into the dark. "Send the choppers. I have Cale, and I have David's drive." 4 hours later, the rhythmic thumping of 3 Black Hawk helicopters vibrated the snowy ground. The dawn cast long, purple shadows across Mount Baker. Tactical DEA teams swarmed the property, hauling Cale out of the woodshed. Liam sat on the tailgate of his truck, a paramedic taping a sterile dressing over his ribs. A senior DEA director approached, holding the vacuum-sealed USB drive Liam had handed over. "This ledger is everything," the director said, his voice hushed. "It takes down Cale's whole network. It's what David died for." He looked past Liam, into the truck cab where Nix slept beside her pups. "The agency will take her to our trauma facility in Virginia. She'll be retired with honors." Liam stood up. He walked to the passenger door. Nix opened one eye, let out a soft huff of air, and rested her chin on his uninjured arm. Her fur smelled like smoke and wet wool. "She's not going to Virginia," Liam stated, not looking back. "She lost her handler. I lost my team. She stays here." The director studied the hardened operator and the battered dog. He nodded once. "Understood, Chief." 3 months later, the smell of fresh-cut pine filled the clearing. The new cabin foundation was set. Liam sat on a rough-hewn stump, drinking black coffee. Nix lay by his boots, her coat thick and glossy, watching 3 massive puppies wrestle in the spring grass. The smallest pup, the one who had stopped breathing, barked fiercely, tackling his brother. Liam smiled, feeling the morning sun on his face. The war was over. If Liam and Nix's incredible story of survival, loyalty, and justice touched your heart today, please hit that like button and share this video with your friends. Your support helps us bring more thrilling, real-life stories of heroism to light. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below to honor Nix, the bravest K9, and Chief Mitchell. Stay safe, and we will see you next time.